Hey guys, what's up? It is Ripe again, back with more Landlords from Hell stories. In today's video you will see what happens when a stingy landlord refuses to fix broken windows and then gets hit with a huge fine. And by the way, I would highly suggest to watch until the end of the video because the last story is an absolute treat. Let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Am I the a-hole for reporting a disabled neighbor to our landlord?" We, 25 female and husband 28 male, lived in a secure, small, friendly building for 5 years, no problems. Each floor has a main hall with laundry room and a studio apartment down a short perpendicular hall. There was an older man living in the studio who died. It rented again on 1st August. I met the new tenants Martin, 50s male, and Lucas, severe cerebral palsy, 20s male, on 2nd August. On 3rd August, Lucas tried to quietly get into our apartment, trying to knock/pushing the door. I was scared but assumed Lucas was just confused. But Lucas came back a lot. Twice, husband answered the door and offered help, but Lucas didn't want him. He came with cash and ID in hand and was asking for me. I told my mom about Lucas. She was actually worried about him and talked to him on 3rd August. He became amorous. She was uncomfortable but handled it well. Lucas confirmed everything was okay and Martin is a trusted person. Mom and I went up to my apartment. Minutes later, Lucas came to my door knocking, ringing the doorbell, trying to get in. With Mom there, I opened it. Lucas offered me $10. "I want to give this to you for services. I want to come in." I declined. Mom left. I called husband and told him what happened. While on the phone, Lucas came back again and tried to force his way in, aggressive pounding and twisting the handle and jerking the door. Husband, livid now, told me to lock myself in the closet, call the cops, and he was calling our landlord who was out of office. Husband left a message reporting them. I did hide, but I didn't call the police because I don't know these people. I don't know if there would be retaliation. Husband agreed that we should talk to Martin and landlord first. My husband got home around 12 yesterday and was up late. At 3 AM Lucas tried to get in again as before. Husband opened the door and told him that if he ever comes to our door or near me again, he is calling the police. Husband also talked to Martin, who had no idea what's been going on. Husband said he seemed apologetic and said he would try to do better. The message husband left for landlord will get returned on Tuesday. We will see what happens. Since 4th August, Lucas has come to the door 9 times and tried to get in 4 times. For weeks I couldn't do laundry or take out the trash because it is all literally inches from their door. I couldn't have the TV on or headphones in. I did not even shower for a week and a half because I didn't want to be caught off guard. I don't want them to get kicked out, but this is not working. We may just move to another unit. I know Lucas couldn't hurt us. I know he has lower cognitive ability and I don't want to make life harder for Martin. They just got here and it is likely just a rough adjustment period, but I don't feel like we are safe and we pay a lot for peace of mind and secure building. Are we the a-holes? And Ripe Stars, I would love to hear what you think about this. Do you think that OP and her husband are the a-holes in this story or not? Personally, I would definitely say they are definitely not the a-holes because, disability or not, the behavior of Lucas is just unacceptable and Martin definitely has to take responsibility for what is happening here. Anyway, a user in the comments said, "Not the a-hole. I don't know what is going on with Lucas, but a disability doesn't excuse bad behavior. You may want to have your husband talk to Martin again and see if Lucas has a caseworker that he can call about his behavior. They may be able to give him some kind of treatment or medication." Another user said, "Not the a-hole. It may be sad for Lucas and Martin, but if they are threatening you and your security and even your daily life, if you feel scared and uncomfortable and unable to do the basic tasks because of Lucas, then maybe they need to be reported. Maybe Lucas needs more help than everybody thought. Anyway, it is not our place to judge him, but it is your place to protect yourself. Definitely not the a-hole, and please be safe and sound and take care of yourself. Handicap does not mean has the right to push the limits. In addition guys, I just saw there has been another update to the story, and the update goes like this. Update: since we left a note for the landlord had a serious talk with Martin and Lucas, and since their conversation took place, Lucas has not been much of a problem anymore. I have to admit I am still kind of scared, but at least Lucas seemed to have calmed down. Martin has since told me that he got Lucas's doctor to get him new medication, and since then his behavior has changed for the better. The next one is a story about a crazy landlord, and it is titled "Landlord Refuses to Fix Broken Windows, Costs Him Thousands of Dollars and His Job." Keeping things vague in this post on purpose. My girlfriend and I moved into a house that had several broken and cracked windows held together with tape. The rest of the house was great and in perfect condition. The landlord promised to fix them as soon as possible. He kept promising to fix them month after month with no action being taken. After 6 months, I began recording his phone calls and had recorded him threatening to have us evicted if we got a lawyer, which is highly illegal in my state. Landlord cannot retaliate against a tenant for getting a lawyer. So we got a lawyer and provided him with the recordings and pictures of the windows. We also contacted the city code enforcement department and reported some minor code violations that we noticed throughout the house. At this time, I worked for a medium-sized payroll and a corporate compliance company who happened to do the payroll for the company that my landlord was the president of. Because of this, I could see exactly which laws he was breaking due to state and federal human resource and labor law regulations. For example, he did not have a company handbook, labor board posters displayed, and didn't have various federal compliance reporting measures in place. Being in the industry, I knew the minimum fines for the slew of violations his company had would be about $730K due to the length of time they had been operating without these requirements in place for his business. So I reported his company to the appropriate regulatory committees, knowing perfectly well that when crap hit the fan, they would look to him for answers. I did not hear anything regarding his company violations for some time, while the legal negotiations continued between my lawyer and his. In the meantime, the code department issued a $10,000 fine for the code violations, including the windows, and required him to fix the windows. Now, anyone who knows Windows knows you should not replace one window at a time, especially when you have numerous bay windows in the house. This required him to replace windows in the entire house, which ended up costing $6,000 as there are a lot of windows in the house. The legal negotiations ended after the windows were replaced. In my state, due to a clause listed in the lease, I was able to bill the landlord for my legal fees to fight him on this issue at $5,000. We are now at $21,000 in costs incurred by the landlord for these windows. A couple months go by and I notice he is no longer on the company payroll. Again, I worked for the company that did his payroll and compliance for his company. When I called his company to verify we shouldn't be paying him, I was informed there were organizational changes due to fines brought against the company for a number of violations. When all was said and done, the landlord paid $21,000 out of pocket directly for the windows, and it cost him his job and his company at least $730,000 in federal and state violations. It did not cost me $1 in the end. I couldn't have been happier with the outcome. And ripe stars, maybe there should be a new category on Reddit called r/window law, because for some reason this sort of reminds me of tree law, where trivial things such as windows can result in large fines and violation costs. Either way, if you have enjoyed the stories so far, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you want to support the channel. Thank you so much in advance, your support means the world to me and it helps my channel tremendously. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Revenge on the Lowlife Landlord who first deprived us of heat and later kept our security deposit. I was a kid back in the 80s, 2 years out of college, when I moved into an apartment by the shore in New Jersey. When the cold weather arrived, there was always a few days when the apartment was cold and we would tell the super and then the heat would start arriving. One year the heat started decreasing in February and inside the apartment it was like in the 50s and we had to start wearing coats. We told the super about it and nothing happened this time. We wrote the landlord about it and still nothing. So we checked with an attorney and learned about warranty of habitability and withholding of rents. So yet another certified letter to the landlord and we start withholding rents. He files a motion to evict us and we answer with the Marini defense, depositing the withheld monies with the court. The judge finds in our favor for all the money we withheld. We continue to live there because there just aren't many other options as we save for a home. Flash forward to living there for 6 years. On the last lease, because we are about to buy a home, we write in a clause that we can break the lease with 45 days notice in writing, similar to his 45-day clause. They don't notice it because it is slightly obscured on the top left of page 2, so they sign off on it and return it to me. So, in the middle of the lease, we give the 45-day written notice, make the rent payments and leave. They don't return our deposit, so we sue for it, demanding double. They sue us for the remainder of the 6 months rent and refuse to return our security deposit. This is no longer a small claims court, but we proceed without an attorney anyway because they are expensive. We arrive at the courthouse and court forces a round of arbitration. The arbitrator says we will lose in front of the judge and to pay the rent remainderments. We refuse and wait for the judge. While waiting, the landlord's attorney drops by and asks why we didn't take the arbitrator's advice. So we tell him about the clause we wrote in and he states he saw it too and that since it was crossed out, it is not part of the deal. We show him our copy of the lease where it is not crossed out and his face goes white as a sheet. He makes a call to the landlord, who then offers to properly break the lease with no penalty and return our security deposit in full. We refuse and we show him the certified letter stating that we would have accepted that deal up until yesterday, but that if you force us to come down to court, we want double damages of the improper withholding of the security deposit. He tries again to reach out to the landlord, but no luck this time. Then we go to see the judge. He looks at both leases and calls their attorney to the bench. The judge takes our lease and thrusts it towards their attorney and says, "This is the lease in force." Their attorney starts walking around the courtroom like a chicken with his head cut off, while I try to laugh as quietly as possible. The judge fines for us for double damages. We receive nothing for a week and I go back to the courthouse where the clerk says they should pay their judgment immediately and tells us about chattel execution and gives us that form. A couple of weeks pass and a check appears from the landlord. Another month passes and we get a call from the court. They have our money. I told them the landlord had sent a check a while back, so it is all good. She tells us that we should have informed the court that we got the money to stop the chattel execution from occurring. The court then sent the sheriff to their offices and confiscated the office equipment and sold it at auction to satisfy the judgment. They said, "Don't worry, they will just return the money to the landlord." That is the revenge, getting the money and having them experience the abrupt seizing of their assets at their place of business, having it sold at auction and then having the money returned to them. Major pro-justice. And Ripe stars, if you ever had to deal with any awful landlords, please feel free to let us know in the comments about your own experiences. Alternatively, of course, I would very much appreciate it if you could post your own stories also on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, where there is a good chance that I might read them in a video. The next one is titled, "Go to the Tenancy Tribunal? If you say so." This is a story of beating a property manager at their own game. New Zealand has some particularly predatory property managers. Their prey is university students and young families who live in our bigger cities. There are stories in our news quite frequently about how poorly they treat tenants. I spent my 20s living in rental properties in Wellington. Most of the houses I lived in were super damp, mold-ridden crap heaps. They were also super expensive. They are even worse now. Fortunately, New Zealand has a fantastic tenancy tribunal who are sick of property managers preying on young people who don't have a lot of money. When I was about 28, my now wife and I found a beautiful house in a suburb called Burhampore. Close to the city, quiet area, near a bus stop, plenty of space including a pretty garden in the back and, most importantly, not expensive. A perfect house. Just before we moved in, I took about 200 photos of the house. I had become very wary of how easily property managers could rake a tenant over the coals for damage, garbage, etc. the previous tenant left behind. We spent a year and a half living there without incident. We had to report to the property manager that trash had been left under the house by the previous tenants and they dealt with it well. When we needed to install high-speed broadband internet, they were easy to deal with and everything seemed to be going swimmingly. About 4 months prior to the end of our lease, I was offered a brewing job in the United States. I informed our property manager that we would need to break our lease earlier than expected, to which she replied, "No problem, let's arrange a time to meet." Prior to meeting with her, I researched her company's policy on moving out of rental properties prior to the agreed date. The company policy was that if a tenant broke the agreement early, then the tenant would have to pay $750 to the property manager. This was supposedly to cover the listing fee. I should mention at this point that listing properties in Wellington was not challenging nor expensive. Most properties were filled within a week. Some property managers were even expecting people to show up with cash to cover bond plus the first month's rent when they were having viewings of the property. There was no way that $750 was going towards just the listing fee. When I went into our meeting, I told her that we were willing to ensure the property was cleaner than when we arrived, and also we were willing to offer an extra $200 for moving out prior to the lease ending. At that point, she showed me the company policy, which stated leaving prior to the end of the agreed lease date would mean a $750 fee for us as the tenants. I acted flabbergasted, as one would, to hear of this shocking news. At this point, our property manager explained to me that the tenants before my wife and I were in a similar situation and had left prior to the agreed date. I explained to her that this was extortion and I thought it was incredibly unfair. I repeated to her that we had offered her $200 to help with relisting the property and that we were willing to list it ourselves. I also said to her that it was ridiculous to think that it would cost more than $100 to list and fill that property. She explained to me, "This is what the tenants before you did, paid the $750, and that is just what everyone does." To which I replied, "Just because everyone else does it doesn't mean it's right." And by the way guys, that is pretty much a motto I live by. Anyway, we argued some more and left it unresolved. On my way out of her office, she said, "If this is still an issue, you should get in touch with the tenancy tribunal." With the rage of 1,000 suns and the ability to bottle emotions like a true Catholic, I managed to respond, "I will do that." As soon as I got home, I went on to the tenancy tribunal website and filed a complaint against the company she represented. Within a day, the tribunal had agreed to help me and contacted the property manager. In turn, she emailed me begging for mercy. "If you agree to drop the complaint, we won't charge you anything. The owner is very disappointed, but if you leave the house in a good state, there will be no more issues." We are not absolute trash, so of course we cleaned the place thoroughly. We moved out without paying them a dime. But the real reward came when I saw her in the city and greeted her with a big smile and waved. I did not think I had the power of invisibility, but she did not seem to see me at all. Edit, for all of you getting upset about us signing the lease knowing that, we did not. It was not included in the agreement, and also, chill out. This is a story of malicious compliance. I'm not trying to pretend I'm some amazing person who fought for equality and justice for all. And the last one is a little bonus story from our own subreddit r/ripe stories, posted by user MA77MC, and it is titled Great Grandfather Blew His Sister Up. So the story Ripe read today about the old lady and the outdoor toilet reminded me of a story my great grandfather told me when I was younger. Please bear with me, he passed away 18 years ago, so I probably heard this story from him 22 or 23 years ago, so some of the details have been forgotten over time, and were relayed to me by a guy in his 90s, although his mind was still good at the time. The background: my great-grandfather, we will call him Bruce, was born at the turn of the 20th century. Unfortunately, his mother died while giving birth, which resulted in some animosity from his family, where he was blamed for her death, especially by his adopted older sister Betty. After the death of his wife, my great-great-grandfather had his mother move in to help raise the children while he worked to support his family. The setting: rural Australia circa 1910, an area that today is the North Shore of Sydney. Now to the story. Betty, who was 2 to 3 years older than Bruce and used to pick on young Bruce, and it is safe to say they never had a great relationship. Unfortunately, Bruce could not remember what the catalyst was for this, but he was about 10 at the time. Now, you need to remember, this was the early 20th century in what was at the time a rural area, and Bruce and his family lived on a large plot of land, and as a result, Bruce's father had a large shed that housed all his chemicals and, most importantly, explosives. Anyway, Betty had done something earlier in the day to get Bruce quite mad at her, and he was determined to get revenge. After thinking about it, he had formed an idea of how he was going to get her back. He snuck out and down to his father's shed and took a small amount of explosives, not a lot. He didn't want to kill her, and his father had taught him by this age about safety with explosives. Anyway, Bruce went and stuck some explosives under the thunderbox, common name for an outdoor toilet in Australia, and put a really lock wick on it, which would give him time to light it and get away before it went up. A few hours later, he was in the yard with his grandma, helping her with the garden, when he saw Betty head for the thunderbox. So he set his plan in action. He snuck away without his grandma noticing and went down and lit the wick and went back up to the garden. Pulled out a plant and was holding this, talking with his grandma, when bang, the thunderbox is in a dozen pieces and Betty is sitting in the middle of the yard, pants around her ankles, sitting on what was left of the toilet. Betty, of course, blamed Bruce for this and came up and hit him, thinking he was behind this. Their grandma, though, stepped in. Betty got sent to her room without dinner for hitting her brother. In the evening, once Bruce's father got home, after noticing the remains of the thunderbox, was determined to find out who had destroyed it. Bruce, however, had an alibi. It couldn't possibly have been him, because his grandma had his back, telling her son that Bruce had been with her, helping in the garden at the time, leaving the father to come to the conclusion that Betty had done it to frame Bruce. I would love to say this ended the war between Bruce and Betty, but unfortunately we don't always get a happy ending. From what I can work out, they lost contact not long after she moved out and got married. And Ripe Stars, I have to say, I really enjoy these stories from grandpas and grandmas, because for some reason these stories are just always amazing. If you have any stories like this to share that your grandma or grandpa always told in the past, then please feel free to share these on r/ripe stories on Reddit. I would be very happy to read them in a video. And Ripe Stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional Ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.